What is up, ladies and gentlemen? We are back. We are live. It is the Freight Coach Morning Show every single weekday. The top morning show in transportation to break down 3 articles every single weekday, 8:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 Central. I got my friend Dave Abels here today. Dave, what's going on, man?
Hey, how's it going, everyone? I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me in today.
No, absolutely. It's always a pleasure. Dave has been around this industry for a very long time. He's seen multiple sides of this industry, asset brokerage, you name it. And that's why he's here today to help break down all of this stuff and share some insight out there. But before we jump in, as always, I got to give a shout out to my friends over at VHub. You guys, asset reutilization, repositioning, that is the wave of the future in freight. Whether you're a trucking company or a freight brokerage, at the end of the day, our shippers, they need trailers. So what can you do with all of this information that's out there? Like right now, for example, that you can get paid to reposition. And I'm going to show this up here. As you can see, there's the dollar amount you get paid to move it. And that's on top of the freight you would find for this. So they have trailers right now in the Chicago area looking to go to Toronto and Montreal, also up into Canada. And then they also have round trips out there. So as you can see, that one going into Montreal, go down to Shippensburg, PA, York, PA. Then they have a round trip out there in that area as well. So again, you got to get creative at times, you guys. You have to not play to the market. You have to create your own market. And this is a way that you can do this with a company like VHub. And, you know, furthermore, like they have the one-way repositionings that are out there, like in the Utah area here going up into Winnipeg. Again, you get paid to do that on top of the freight you find for it. So again, reach out to my friends over at VHub. VHubApp.com. My man Xavier Campos is my point of contact over there. Reach out to them and they can answer any questions you guys might have about it. Dave, what have you, like, from your perspective, I mean, that's the biggest thing as a broker that you need. You need access to trailers. And that's kind of why a lot of those large enterprise shippers don't work with brokers, is because we don't have trucks. We don't have trailers, and that's what they need.
I agree 100%. And the cool thing about VHub, there's been that kind of a game plan around for years. But I would have to call somebody, and it was a guy that had a big tablet, a pad, a paper, and he was writing down where trailers were and where they needed to go and how long he could have them. So I think that the technology that they're bringing to this platform is going to be great. But whether you're a broker or whether you're a carrier, coming from the carrier side, many times throughout my career, I've used one-way trailers. And I've also got trailers at times that I need to reposition. Rather than reposition those at my cost, I might as well put them into a program like VHub, let VHub handle it for us, and the end result is the same. But to your point, Chris, yes, brokers need trailers, right? So there you go. Anytime you're running a power only program, partner up with VHub, and it's going to make your day a little bit easier.
Dude, and that's the thing, man, is it's like we need to get creative in freight, you know, because it's like, what are those main differentiators that are out there? Like your company that you're with now, you know, you guys have 250 trucks in your fleet. Okay, but how many other trucking companies out there have 250 trucks in their fleet? So it's like, how do you differentiate yourself? And I think especially as a broker, when there's 18,000 of us out there, you want to sound different on the phone, offer to have some skin in the game. That's a big value add to a lot of shippers of, hey, I'll go drop 10 trailers at your facility. How does that help you? 9 times out of 10, they're going to need that. That's why they don't want to work with brokers. Well, one of the many reasons why they don't want to work with brokers, but that's
it's the predominant reason, I think. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, drop trailers, he who has the most trailers wins.
Yes, absolutely. International Road Check starts today. Wheel End Components, it goes through Wednesday the 9th, or excuse me, today's Tuesday, Thursday the 19th is what it goes through. How do you guys prepare for that with the fleet your size? And you know, because like, again, this isn't something that jumps out of nowhere by any stretch of the imagination.
So I think, you know, it's a multi-pronged approach. Ultimately, we know early on what the road check focus is going to be. So we start to, as we do PMs throughout the spring season, start prepping for it. Then about 2 weeks ago, when I started here, I noticed safety started sending out messages to the fleet, telling them what's coming up. And again, our maintenance department, everybody that's coming in is making sure that everybody knows. Out in the lobby, they've got road check signs that are up this week. So it's really just an awareness. And at the end of the day, most companies like ours run new enough equipment that we're in pretty good situation. But at the same time, you have a lot of independent contractors that come in. We had one today in class that was below spec on brakes. Guess what they're checking this week? Brakes, right? So we're going to get them dialed in.
No, definitely. And that's the thing, that preventative maintenance is so key, especially if you don't have the resources to have new equipment and you're trying to maintain, because you got your truck paid off and you're trying to eke out as
Yep.
much profit as possible. I mean, it goes a long way to keep those little things down. I mean, that's what my old man always harped on, is just light maintenance, keep your little things up and running, your components clean and functional, and your overall, because I mean, these engines on these semis are built to be just used and abused for millions of miles if they're if they're taken care of.
Correct.
You know,
it's all about intervals, and every company has a little bit of a different interval, but no matter what that interval is, you got to hit it. And every company should start looking at those things 2,500, 3,000 miles before the interval. That's a week, right? So a week's worth of running. You got to start looking at these things out and get them pushed into your company shops.
No, definitely. It's so key. It's so key. And then, hey, I guess there's a little bit of a reprieve in diesel. I guess it dropped a whopping 0.01 penny this week, between this week and last week. So we're still at a staggering $5.61 per gallon of gold, aka diesel, right now. I mean, we're up like almost $2.40 year over year a gallon. What is something that, you know, because obviously the FMCSA has got, you know, they're all over the headlines right now about this governor mandate and all that other stuff on the engines, which I'm not a fan of. Like, don't tell an independent business how to operate. But what I'm a fan of is showing the information of what could benefit them if they looked at it from a different angle. So like, how do you guys take it right now, where, you know, when it comes to conserving fuel burn and everything else? Is it like the idle time if they're at a dock or something like that? Do you guys have APUs on your trucks potentially? Like, what does that look like?
Some of them have APUs and some of them don't, but we got to manage everybody. So whether you do or whether you don't, it's an educational thing. We have a lot of independent contractors, lease purchase drivers, and we have some true owner operators that come in with their own power. Obviously, those that come in with their own power, we don't make them manage their speed. But at the same time, we educate them on what that savings could be. And that's the same thing with the lease purchase drivers. Our trucks are set at 68 on the foot, 70 on the cruise. Try to promote cruise versus foot because the savings are a little bit better. But at the end of the day, every mile per hour counts. And in times like this, hell, you know, we're talking about diesel. I filled up my Ford Expedition this weekend, $125 to fill up a gas tank in a car. Right. I mean, so it's at a time that we should all pay attention to everything we're doing. And unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen out there in the driving world, sometimes that means managing your speed and slowing down.
Yeah. And I think that, again, it's education in times like this, Dave, is what keeps them profitable when the market flips. It's teaching them about, and this is for everybody. Again, like at the end of the day, it's not my duty or my job to tell somebody, like to be like, hey, what are your costs? But it's like the benefit of you knowing that information as a business owner, that education piece, that's going to help you pay off your loans faster on your equipment. That's going to help you position yourself for when these markets change. Because I mean, you've been in this industry almost 30 years, Dave. Like, what's happening right now is not an anomaly by any stretch of the imagination. What's happened over these last 2 years is not an anomaly. Markets shift. The extremes of them is what has kind of been the anomaly. It's kind of been outside of normal patterns with that. But that doesn't change the fact that trucks are going to continuously run. Freight's going to continuously move. But it's what you learn in these times when your costs are up is going to help you save so much more when your costs are down, so you can reinvest back into your business.
And I think you mentioned something that's really critical: reinvest back into your business. So when the rate's up $1.50, even if the fuel wasn't up, which offsets a great component of that rate, make sure you put that money back into your business, put that into your maintenance account, put that into your savings account, put that into your future truck purchase or future trailer purchase account. Don't put that in a new car. Don't put that in a bigger home. Don't put that into a big boat, because at the end of the day, I'll tell you, after almost 30 years in this business, the cycles go up and they go down and they go up and they go down. And you need to plan for the downside of the cycle, right? So if you're protected and you can run your business on your own cash at the down market, then you're going to be fine in the upside. But what's happened, Chris, and I think what makes this cycle different than most, look at the numbers of independent contractors that have went out and got their own authority in the last 2 years as compared to any other 2 years, perhaps in time, especially past deregulation in the 80s. But you're going to see a greater number of people that jumped into this business on their own as their own businessman in the last 2 years than ever. So they haven't seen those cycles.
Yeah.
They only know the up cycle right now. They're just starting to feel the down. and they're leery. And that's one of the things we'll discuss today. Is it down? Is it not? All those kind of things. But that's where we're at. We have a new breed of business owners this time than in any other cycle.
Yeah. And I think now is education is of the utmost importance more than ever. It's learning from individuals like yourself who have seen multiple market shifts. It's putting that information out there. Because again, I don't need to know your costs, but you need to know your costs so you can take this information and apply it to your business. Because that's what we're all about here, man. I'm coming from a working class family in northern Wisconsin. I want to help people live their American dream. I want to put this education out there. Whether they choose to use it or not is completely and solely up to them as a business owner. But we're putting this information out there so you can navigate through any market shift that's out there. So before we jump into our articles, though, we're at day 27 of the Freight Coach Tally of there being a truck parking issue out here in this industry, as well as facilities where they don't let drivers use the restrooms, which is something that I'm not going to stop talking about until I hear meaningful change from the driver community, because that's where it's coming from. So it's like talking about something like that, though, Dave, like how do you, as a leader of an organization, when your drivers are coming to you with this feedback, what's a plan of attack from there?
It goes back to when we had the beginning of COVID and I started reaching out to truck stops, made visits myself. So at the end of the day, feedback's only as good as what you do with it. So if I got a bunch of drivers that come in and tell me certain location or certain areas of the country have issues and we as the leadership don't push back on those, I mean, I'm a small enough carrier. I got 250 trucks, right? But we buy a lot of fuel, right? Those guys that have 10,000 trucks buy even more fuel than we buy, right? At the end of the day, if there's fuel stops or there's locations that are not working with your drivers, you got to push back. You got to make phone calls. You got to tell them, hey, that's unacceptable. If you'd like to do business with us, you're going to have to take care of my team, no matter who that team member is.
Yeah. And I think that's what's going to make that widespread change out there is those conversations that need to happen. Because I mean, again, I see why certain facilities may not offer that due to whatever circumstances that led to it. But we need to look at this as what can we do more? Again, if you want this industry to change, in my opinion, it's got to start with you. What can you do differently at the driver level or the broker level, and then see that through.
One thing real quick too, and I think what'll be interesting is as the capacity changes, all right, so we talk about shippers and which shippers will allow you to use facilities. I got to believe during those times when they can't get trucks, they let everybody use their facilities and open up those doors wide open. It'll be interesting to see over the next 3 to 6 months if the market continues to drop a little bit, do some of those doors close back up? Because when they've got multiple carriers willing to haul their freight, do they have to be as courteous? Boy, I certainly hope so, because we need shippers and they need us. So that partnership shouldn't be cyclic like the freight patterns. It should be 365 days a year.
No, I agree with you there, man. We got to start breaking down those traditional silos that have been plaguing this industry in my opinion, for a very long time. First article today from my friends over at the JOC. Cass sees freight demand ebbing while others see slower growth. This article was released last Friday by Bill Cassidy. He's a great guy. You guys should follow him. It comes out here as U.S. spot truckload rates tumble and broader measures of truck pricings rise. The U.S. logistics sector is increasingly divided over whether freight demand is declining ahead of a freight recession or a broader downturn. And then it goes on to say, after a nearly 2-year cycle of surging freight volumes, the freight cycle has downshifted with a thud, wrote Tim DeNoyer. He's the VP and senior analyst at ACT Research and author of the Cass Freight Index. U.S. domestic freight volumes fell 2.6% from March and were down 0.5% year over year. When you hear that stuff, Dave, when you hear that, because again, that the entire freight market or the spot market, for example, is down 0.5%. Is that what that means? Is that how you read that data, what they're talking about there?
Yeah. What was interesting to me too, is they did talk at one point in here about some of the changes in capacity were actually that the wait times have decreased. That's the first time I've heard that recently, right? I did see a statistic, maybe it was about 17 minutes on average, they've decreased the wait times. Take that times the number of trucks on the road, and that could be a significant impact back to capacity. So I think that's something that I saw that was different than most. But the article's interesting, and it gives a little bit of a counterpoint to some of the other things we're seeing right now.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, So let's see. And then some of the capacity is returned to the trucking is not additional drivers, tractors, or trailers, but additional time and space gained through greater efficiency. As spot market costs peaked and fuel costs rose, a lot of shippers realized they were shipping truckloads that were too light. And this is another thing was over these last couple of years, what you saw where they needed to get stuff out. All right. In like they needed to get stuff out. There was a backlog of freight on a lot of shippers' docks. So they were sending out 10 pallets or they were sending out 20,000 pounds that normally would have been a 1-pick 2-drop load, but they needed to change it into a 1-in-1. So it goes on to say consolidation of those 20 or 25,000 pound loads into 40 or 50,000 pound shipments frees up capacity. If you ship 9 truckloads instead of 10 or 11, that's capacity added to the network, said Kubit. The rate of capacity addition gets even better when you use 5 trucks instead of 10. Consolidation can also create impression that demand has dropped when it hasn't. The number of individual loads may be lower, but the same amount of freight is being shipped with fewer trucks. Shippers also are finding more efficiency on the dock as well. That demand is not down. People still have money to spend, and the economy is pretty robust, they said. It's not so much that we're in a freight recession as some of the real inefficiencies have been worked out over the networks. And that's one thing that, again, because it's like, yes, the spot market is changing. It has changed, though those rates have dropped. But again, there's so many different data. Everything's so subjective, and I think when you really get into the nitty-gritty of this market, of this industry, it's not all contracted full truckload and spot market full truckload. There are so many different components that are out there. There are so many shippers that, maybe over these last couple of years with capacity being what it was, there was a combination of those shipments. Now it is a 1-pick 2-drop load. We're not going to wait to fill it out. We're just going to get it out. We're going to send it at half capacity because our suppliers need that freight. Our customers need that freight on their shelves. So again, like they've looked at that, but I also want to think that, a lot of these shippers have realized that, oh my gosh, we were inefficient when they've made those changes. Because if you think people just sat back at some of these large shippers and said, oh, fuck it, it is what it is. Like, no, they are dissecting every single thing in their operation to be like, what can we do to alleviate this? Especially when their transportation budgets were getting fucking torpedoed by like March of last year.
I agree 100%. I mean, everybody's got a boss, right? So whether you're a shipper and you're at a certain location or whether you're a huge conglomeration, somebody is pushing back on you. And to your point, as freight rates have went up 25, 30, 40, 50%, then somebody's going to have to pay attention to it. And on the other side of that, we, the carriers, have been pushing back for quicker times to unload, quicker times to load, and all those things. So to a certain extent, we've created that monster, right? At the end of the day, we wanted to get out of there faster. Now that we're out of there faster, we can't necessarily complain about the fact that changes the dynamic of capacity, right? Yeah. And it was kind of funny because when you just went through that, I started to think to myself, well, I'm that guy, right? I'm the one that wanted to get my truck unloaded earlier. Now that my truck's unloaded earlier and he can go on and do somebody else, I've provided capacity for that next shipper that I might not have been able to get to until the following day. Yeah. So at the end of the day, we've got to take advantage of that, get in there, utilize our trucks to the best of our ability, and that's all we can do.
No, absolutely. Again, if you guys want to check that out, go over to the joc.com. Title of that article is Cass sees freight demand ebbing while others see slower growth. Next article we're going to break down today is from The Trucker. It is thetrucker.com, multitude of issues affecting today's trucking industry. It starts off by the war in Ukraine, inflation, and impacts of recent COVID lockdowns in China have made it for a rocky ride in the trucking industry in April, as reflected as reports by the ACT Research and FTR. Given the corrosive effects of inflation and the Fed's response, uncertainty as to the depth and duration of events in Ukraine and the impact of COVID lockdown into China is walking a fine line in 2022. Trucking industry profits tend to lag the freight cycle, so are likely to peak around Q3 of 22. As profits relative to the cycle, so does the production of heavy-duty trucks and trailers. So when you see something like that, Dave, how does that, what does that do to somebody like you? Or if you're a smaller operation out there, when you see something like that, how do you guys take that information and react to it?
Well, I think we take this, and then luckily, especially timing for me, just recently coming into this role, I've met with a lot of truck dealers in the last couple of weeks So we understand that the capacity and what it is, and we also understand what our shippers can give us for freight. We understand what we can get for drivers. Now we have to merge the three. You got truck capacity, trailer capacity, driver capacity, and freight. So there's 4 different pegs here that we have to line up. One of the things that we do here is we pay attention to the cost, right? So we're also talking about that downside of the market. At the end of the day, there's going to be trucks come available here in the next few months that are going to be cancellation of orders by carriers that had pre-ordered, and now the rates have went up. Yeah. One of the meetings I had last week with one of the OEMs was just that. Hey, you've got trucks on order. Man, really hate you to do this to you, but at the end of the day, I got to bring the number up by X. Let's call it $5,000 a truck. Okay, well, what was my negotiation prior to that? Do I have a good enough number in there that $5,000 is palatable, or do I walk away? Other people are walking away, which creates that capacity for other people. So I think there's a lot of variables that go into this. There's definitely an issue with truck capacity right now coming from the OEMs due to chip shortages, due to supply chain issues, due to the war in Ukraine, just like they mentioned. Everybody has to look at their own business model and see how they manage that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And again, it's like, this is what I mean by so much of this data it's so subjective, because like you're talking about right there, like you guys have 250 trucks in your fleet. You guys are ordering just a ballpark example, 10 new trucks a year, 15 new trucks a year. How does that look for an organization of your size?
Well, best case scenario, we'd be on a 3-year trade cycle. So you might have 80 trucks a year. Worst case scenario would be on a 5 years. So we'd have 50 trucks a year. So somewhere we would have been right around 85 trucks this year, but we did have some issues with getting those. And now again, we have to make decisions as the prices went up. Recent increase last week, that wasn't the first increase this year. So let's say trucks now cost $25,000 more. You can see the market starting to change. We have to determine, do we want to be one of those that pushes and wait for the market to normalize, or do we want to pay $25,000 more for that truck to get that capacity right now in a market where perhaps the rates are continuing to decline? So everybody's got to make their own decision in that regard, but watch that market daily, because the price of steel changes every day. The price of the truck changes every day along with the market. Now, we're not too susceptible to the spot market because we do a lot of customer business. So as you get larger, you're able to do more. You protect yourself throughout these cycles. But those carriers, those 1s, the 5s, the 10s, the 25s that are solely relying on the spot market, I'd hate to be paying $200,000 for a new truck or $150,000 for a 2019 and double the money for a trailer right now. So they got to be cognizant.
What could, from your perspective and your experience, how could a fleet of 5, 10, 15 trucks, how could they get that direct, consistent freight from a shipper right now? Like what should their target market be? Because like, I mean, again, we all know the large enterprise shippers out there, they need volume. It's not a knock against your 10, 15 truck operation, but you don't move the needle from them on a pure volume perspective. So what kind of profile of shippers should that 5, 10, 15, 20 truck operation be looking for? And how could they possibly position themselves to get that kind of that direct relationship with them to keep that consistency?
So it's kind of cool that you say this, because again, I'm going to date myself, but in the old days, we would drive around, right? Go into the shipping areas of the whatever city we were in, and we would look at trailers, and we would look and see where our competitors' trailers were, and we go up and knock on doors and try to find smaller shippers. I think at the end of the day, if you're that 5, 10 truck guy, you've got to figure out who those carriers, those shippers are that don't have a national platform. I live in Minneapolis, right? So north of Minneapolis, there's a lot of mom and pop shippers that are probably pretty relevant in that marketplace, but they maybe only ship 10 or 15 or 20 loads a week and not 200 or 2,000. You can get in with one of those people and you can become a core component of their business. That is a great thing. When I first started out in this business in 1995, the company I was with Allied Signal, and they were doing Fram filters, and that made that guy's entire company. He started out with 1 truck, was pulling loads for him. Within 5 years, he had 100 trucks pulling Allied Signal freight. So if you can get in with those smaller shippers, that's the key. And how to determine that, now there's Zoom info, there's all different kinds of things. You don't necessarily have to drive around parking lots like we did in the old days. Take that a step further. If you want to get in with the big boys, then you're going to have to partner up with a 3PL or a legitimate company like AFC Logistics or one of the other great companies out there. And you're going to have to get into their bids, and you're going to have to let them bid on the big boys freight for you on your behalf and let them use your capacity, whether it be a drop carrier capacity or not.
Yeah. And that's the thing that I want, like, it's doable. And I know that there's a lot of people out there who, they might not be a sales rep at the end of the day. They might not, but there's companies out there that you can align with to find that consistency. Cause it's like right now it's like, how do we reduce your downtime? That, like, again, I know drivers, owner ops, and small fleets don't want to hear this, but maybe the load pays a little bit less overall, but it has more efficient shipping times, more efficient offload times, and you're able to turn and get more runs in a week that way. Again, it's like, you need to look at this from a business. You're no longer a driver or a driver that owns a company. You're a business owner. How can we make our operations more efficient right now?
Right. One thing too, cash, right? So at the end of the day, if I've partnered direct with that shipper, I'm on that shipper's pay terms. If I've got 1 to 5 or 10 trucks, I may not be able to deal with 62 days or 90-day pay terms. Yeah. So at the end of the day, if I'm working through a 3PL, they're bidding on my behalf and I'm taking that, maybe I'm getting a nickel less per mile, but I'm getting quick paid in 48 hours or in 7 days versus 60 to 90 days. Cash is king when you're running a small business.
Yeah. And that's one of the worst kept secrets out there about why, with brokers, we are a bank for a very long time. A lot of our shippers have 90, 120-day payment terms. So while we're paying our carrier partners within 30 days, we're not getting paid for sometimes 60 to 90 days after the fact, So again, it's like, the reality is, you guys, is we all have skin in the game. We're all leveraged. Granted, we as a broker don't have the equipment leverage, but we have hundreds of thousands of dollars leveraged on payments that are out there and receivables all the time. So again, there are very real sides of this. I know that just because I'm a broker and I don't live in a truck, that doesn't mean that we don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars on the line every single month either. Again, yeah, the article was from the Trucker, and that was just a multitude of issues affecting today's trucking industry. And we just got a couple minutes left, so we'll just bring this one up. This was from FreightWaves. It's a USPS trucking contractor. Matheson files for bankruptcy. It seems like it's like a yearly occurrence, Dave, that a lot of these companies might have only been reliant on one large customer only, and then that somebody comes in cheaper, and then they pull all their business. Is that what you've seen? Because I've seen, like, it seems like predominant mail carriers, as a USPS mail carriers, are the ones that kind of go first, it seems.
In automotive. I mean, so like at the end of the day, that's a segmented business. I got to believe, as I read through that article, that, it said that there was some structural changes in the way the post office is able to pay their carriers. So at the end of the day, and as a U.S. citizen and part owner of the Postal Service, right, I guess I got to be appreciative of the fact that they're looking at their business model, which has lost money for a lot of years, and trying to figure that out. But at the same time, if you're that carrier that your only egg is in that basket, then you got to go with that flow. And the same thing with automotive. Most of those people that are really good at automotive do automotive. So when you come into a time like a pandemic, and again, that's never happened in my year. I'm 53 years old, never seen a pandemic, right? Yeah. But it did occur. And during that last 2 years, plants are down consistently. I got a call yesterday from a buddy of mine, just started running automotive. He says, Dave, is it normal for plants to be down 2 or 3 weeks? Well, normally it used to be 2 weeks in the winter, 2 weeks in the summer. But right now, quite frankly, they're down all the time, and it has to do with the chip shortage. So you really need to be diversified. Whether it's mail, whether it's auto, whether it's water, whether it's meat and produce, whatever that is, diversify your fleet the best you can. Get in 3 or 4 different niches. Be good at it. Don't get in too many things. You can't be everything to everybody, because at the end of the day, in that down market, service and communication is what you have to sell.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's one thing that, again, it is, if you're that small fleet that's out there, 5, 10 trucks, don't just dedicate all of your fleet to one shipper that's out there. Build out a matrix, have multiple companies know where you are. In the event, we got to keep diverse in our customer base as well. And it's just like a lot of brokers I talk to and a lot of people I know in the industry, like 80 to 85% of their revenue is tied to one account, and you can't have all your eggs in one basket.
Right,
you got to look at how do we break this apart. So That was it. That one was from FreightWaves, USPS trucking contractor Matheson files for bankruptcy. And that's it for today, you guys. That was quick 30 minutes that was out there. But again, Dave, I appreciate you joining and sharing your perspective. How can anybody reach out to you, man?
Dables at afctransport.com, or you can look on the internet and get me on LinkedIn. Anytime anybody needs any advice, anybody looking for an opportunity to join the team, we're building out our logistics program right now in Tampa, Florida, looking to add locations, Northwest Arkansas, perhaps Minneapolis. So just reach out. We'd love to hear from you, and always there to help.
Well, that answers my next question. If you guys are hiring, I love how you just threw that in there. But yeah, you guys reach out to Dave. Dave's a great guy. I've worked with him in the past, and they're all about the progress in this industry. And I appreciate you sharing your time. If you guys made it, again, I appreciate you guys, all your support. Reach out to my friends over at VHub, vhubapp.com. Reach out to my man, Xavier Campos. I appreciate you guys all. The audio replay will be available on the podcast later. If you saw value in this, do me a favor, subscribe and share this out. Tell a friend about this. That's how this is all grown, is through this organic movement and you guys sharing the show and everything. I appreciate you guys all so much, and we'll be talking to you soon.